Wouldn't know anyway. Matthew chapter 13, starting at verse 31. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air can come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. Jesus told the crowds all these things in parables. Without a parable, he told them nothing. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth to speak in parables. I will proclaim what has been hidden from the foundation of the world.
Thank you. I'm going to hear our second reading, and Martin is going to read for us.
To the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write, these are the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Look, I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but are lying, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word of patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast to what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. If you conquer, I will make you a pillar in the temple of my God. You will never go out of it. I will write on you the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem that comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches.
Thank you. We've met them, or at least we've heard of them, the pillars, the powerful and significant members of a society or a community, the ones on whom everything depends, the ones who understand how things work, who can get things done because they know people, they have influence, they are solid, reliable. Without them, things fall apart. We talk about them as the pillars of the community. We may even have been them in various situations, serving on committees, organising, sorting things out, caring for the community. And the church at Philadelphia would know about pillars. The church was in a very fertile valley, but an area prone to earthquakes. Indeed, in 17 AD, so about a generation and a half before this letter was written, there was such a severe earthquake that the city was uninhabitable for several years. And the emperor, who was Tiberius at the time, relieved them of taxes for 5 years in order to be able to repay for the building of the city. So they knew about the need for buildings to be well supported and held up by strength and stability, by pillars that were unshaken. So today we're with the 6th of the churches in Asia, to which these opening messages at the beginning of the book, the letter of Revelation, is given. And this one, above all, is about encouragement. And as we hear it, we're in the presence of the ones who are the pillars of that church. The ones who hear this word, know themselves commended and encouraged by the Spirit of God. The ones who are victorious, I will make pillars. The people who are successful, who win, who are triumphant, are the ones the Spirit will bless and on whom the church will be built and on which it will depend. So I'm going to leave now. In fact, I suggest we all do. Because we are not those with power and influence. We know the struggle we have even to get our local MP to talk to us, let alone have an impact on the multinationals whose behaviour needs to change if our climate chaos is going to be reversed. We can send our shoeboxes, and we should, but it doesn't stop the bombs falling in Ukraine. We can write letters, we can even go on the protests, but the people of Gaza are sleeping in tents in torrential rain and having to walk out of the hospital on their own feet without medical care. We can't even get the people in our own town into homes. We can donate to the food bank, but we can't get the government to raise benefits enough so that food banks aren't needed. We can't get the big employers to pay wages so people can live securely. We can bemoan the pressure on the NHS, but we can't find the resources to make it work well, and we could go on. We need to admit it. We are not powerful. We're not wielding great influence. We are not pillars of society. We're not even pillars in our denomination as we look at it, heading in a direction of self-destruction and pain and can do nothing about it. So if we are not the ones who are the pillars, does that mean we are not the ones who have conquered? We are not the ones who will be blessed? Well, I guess you're not going to be surprised if I say we need to hold on for a moment and look at the whole message. Because the thing that is most obvious about this church in Philadelphia, the church that receives this promise of being those around whom the temple of God, the promise, the presence of God with them, that presence being there, fulfilling the promise of renewal and hope that's invested in the description of a new creation. The most obvious thing about them, which the speaker mentions right at the beginning of the message, I know your works. I know you have but little power. This is a church that is small and beleaguered. It's weak and outnumbered. These are not people to whom the community looks for leadership and empowerment. These are not the leaders of the cities or the mover and the shakers. They're not the ones with the ear of the emperor who can get the tax rebate when there's an earthquake. They can't sort things out. They can't pull the levers of power. Socially, politically, in terms of education and resource, it's quite possible they're even less powerful than we are. They weren't living in any kind of democratic state. They have no voice unless it's provided by wealth or status, and not many of these churches were filled with people of wealth or status at this time. That came later and was by no means an unmixed blessing. And nor were they, any more than the other congregations we've met as we've listened to these messages, nor were they those who were in the mainstream of society. Their faith, their patterns of behaviour, perhaps even the ways they were constrained to earn a living, all of that would have meant they were excluded from quite a bit of the normal social life of the city. They were excluded from the guilds and from the religious processions. They were kept out of the celebrations. They would be not part of the normal social gatherings and networks, the kind of things that get you achieving pillarhood. And they were also clearly facing pressure of some sort. Those words about the synagogue of Satan, those who say they are Jews and are not but are liars. We assume, the commentators assume it refers to a context where those who are now in the church are those who have been put out of the synagogue because of their allegiance to Jesus, or that there were some who were also claiming to follow Jesus but were compromised in some way. Either way, there's a group that's clearly attacking and undermining this congregation and presumably making them even more aware of their weakness, because it seems they can't do anything to stop it. Now, we're not in that position. There may be those within the Christian community who regard us as wrong in various areas, not least our position on sexuality, but also in our theologies, in our practice of justice. Even, it has to be said, having me as minister, You know, there are other churches that wouldn't have a woman up here doing this, but they're not really causing us this kind of difficulty that seems to be being referred to here. But there are pressures, and it would be foolish of us to deny that. Pressures to be seen to be well behaved and respectable, pressures to compromise on our aspirations of radical welcome, pressures to avoid speaking out with unpopular opinions. They may come to us from all sorts of places, and they don't put us in any danger, but it can get wearisome and heavy constantly to be finding ourselves at odds with what is, or what is said to be, the majority position in certain areas. The people of the country want this. Well, I don't. And constantly to be having to fight against that, it does get heavy. It can feel unnerving to find that what we are about is misunderstood sometimes. Sometimes it feels like it's misunderstood willfully. It can be disheartening to know that what is so important to us, the invitation and the possibility to be here, to be a community, to explore worship and service, that seems unimportant to so many people. All of that can be wearying and make us wonder if it's worthwhile carrying on. So as we listen with that congregation in Philadelphia, we might recognize that even though much of the context is different, and there are many ways in which we are better off, yet still we get that sense of having little power. So might the message to them also be a word for and to us? Because if it is, I think there are two things within it that we could do with hearing. Firstly, the open door, the invitation, the possibility and promise that's given to them depends not on them, not on their power, not on their influence, not even on their capacity, but on the promise and the activity of the true and the Holy One who has the keys. Which is to say, the work they are doing, the service and worship they are offering, their very presence and meaning depends not on them, on what they are able to do and to offer, but on Jesus and on what he is doing. Now, since their works are known and recognized and so honored by Jesus in the opening words, it's not that they're sitting back on their hands and doing nothing. They are obviously active. They are doing stuff. And there are possibilities for them to do more. When we read about open doors in Scripture, it is associated, it indicates opportunities for ministry, for contact and service and communicating the love and the presence of God. But what is here is not, get out there and do more. And it's not, it all depends on you and you need to put your energy into it and find the resources and the strength to do the stuff, to bring in the kingdom, to make it all happen. What's important here is the promise of Jesus, I have set before you an open door which nobody can shut. The call that you have will not be something you fail at because there are no resources or because pressure is too much or because you are not enough. The door I have set before you will not be shut. And I think, like the church at Philadelphia, we need to hear that. We've spent some time in the last year thinking about who we are, who we would like to be, and inevitably that has also meant reflecting on who we are not, or rather on what we are not, what we don't have, where we're aware of threats and strains. And that's important because there may be something we need to address, there will be changes we need to think through. I really, really want us to hear this. Where the door is open for us to serve, to love, to be this people in this place for this time, we have and are what is needed. Because the work, the meaning of the work, the success of the work is not ours. It's not our responsibility to carry it all alone. The message very clearly links the open door and the little power. And the one doesn't cancel out the other. And that's true in both directions. They have little power, but that doesn't mean the door is not opened. And the promise is not, the door is opened and you will become powerful and strong. There is no promise here of extra power coming in. The promise is the door won't be closed. And what's important is their faithfulness. That's where the link comes. I have opened the door, you have little power, and you have kept my word and not denied my name. They have continued to live faithfully, and more than that, to live in line with who they know God to be in Jesus. That's what it is, not to deny God's name. Now, we don't know exactly what circumstances this applied for them in Philadelphia towards the end of the first century, but we do know something of our own circumstances. We do know what it means not to live faithfully. We also know what it means not to deny the name of the one we follow. After all, we pray together every week, hallowed be your name, or equivalent words. And in praying that, we are praying and committing to living in ways that honor, hallow, are in accord with the name of God. That is the self-revelation of God, the who God is that we meet in Jesus, who reaches out to those on the margins, who challenges the self-serving structures that exclude, who chooses not to respond to violence with violence, verbal, political, social, economic, who dares to look for God's presence in the small things like the mustard seed that's ignored and the yeast that's hidden. When those practices and convictions and intentions shape us, then we are hallowing God's name. We are not denying, but affirming the name and the being of the one we follow. And that's the first thing we need to hear. That the doors that are open for us, and we may need to take time to reflect and discern them, but they will not be ones that we have to ignore or feel inadequate towards because we have little power. Because as we seek to live faithfully, to follow the one we meet in Jesus, to live out these values and aspirations and expectations, then he is at work in and through and among us. And then secondly, the promise to this weak, uncertain, unimportant Philadelphian community that they will be pillars of the temple, marked with, that's expressive of the new Jerusalem, the fulfillment of the intention of God. Might we hear that as a promise to us too? Again, not that we will be powerful and influential wielders of strength, imposing our will on a community or a society, but that in our faithfulness, in our committing to expressing who we are and how we live in the nature of the one we meet in Jesus, we will be those whose lives do shape the world in hidden ways, whose life together as a congregation, as a community, will point to and give glimpses to what God is doing and how we are created to be. That's the mustard seed, small, easily overlooked, in fact regarded as a weed, and to be rooted out by the farmers who would first listen to Jesus telling that story, and yet offering a home to many. Or the yeast, hidden, treated as something not to be honoured. Holy bread, at the time Jesus is telling that story, was unleavened. There's something ambiguous about yeast in Jesus' story, but it changes the world and feeds many. The call's not to be big and impressive and shiny and significant, but to live with faithfulness that means we might be overlooked, or we might even be regarded as a bit ambiguous and unhelpful, or as in the way. And we know ourselves as a good place, but not powerful. But we are more than that. This gathering, this community, operating in all its different ways, in the room, over the pixels, not just on Sunday mornings, but all through the week. And we've added an extra to the table now, a carrier bag to represent Saturday morning food bank collections. But this community, it's not just a good place to be with friends and to have fun and to share concerns. It's not even just a place and a context in which to think about our faith, what it might look like to negotiate it in various bits of life. It's not even just a place to serve. This is a glimpse of heaven. Not as a cloud where we sit and play harps, but as the fulfillment of God's intention for the world and for human life. It's an imperfect glimpse, perhaps, but all our glimpses are going to be that. And it is these glimpses, these gleams that give us courage and feed our aspirations. How can we do this better? How can we go through the door that invites us to deeper inclusion, to more engagement with our neighbours, maybe not more quantitatively, but more lovingly, more givingly, to a fuller expression of the intentions we have? How might we expect and seek more justice and peace and the integrity of creation? It's not about doing more. Most of us are doing as much as we can, and some of us are doing more. It's not even about recruiting more people to do more things, though if that happens, that's great. It's about engaging ever more deeply individually and as a congregation with what it is to be finding God in all things and finding more of God's promise and presence. So that's where it never ends. That's where we can never say what Martin just said, and I never expected to hear in this church: we have enough. So glad we have enough boxes. But we can never say we have enough of God. We can never say we've done it all. It's not that the needs that will always seem to be asking more of us, or the injustice that we want to resist. What never ends is God. And so the possibilities that we have, that we are offered, are of that encounter, of loving more, of trusting more, of knowing more, of being more alert to how much we are loved and what God is doing. And that's the way that we are made pillars, around which the temple is present. The activity of God is seen. As and when we are more and more founded in God's presence and so reflective of that to the world, so we are the ones, the place where the presence of God is made concrete in the world. This congregation in Philadelphia was small and weak and uncertain and unimportant. And in and through them, God's presence was and is made known and expressed. And as for them, so in mercy, grace, and hope, it is for us.